The Nintendo Switch is one of the most successful consoles of all time. Some would even call it the best. But Sonic games have a so-so reputation on the system.
Holy cow, what are you showing me? Hey, come on!
Some of them fit the Switch's form factor to a T, whereas others struggle massively performance-wise. Today, I'm going to be playing every Sonic game on Nintendo Switch in release order, and coming up with the ultimate Sonic on Switch ranking. Now, I feel the need to make it clear early that although I love these games, I do not claim to be any good at them. In fact, I'm really actually very, very bad. And you'll probably see it in my gameplay, so I am very sorry for the D rank level crimes you're about to see today. I feel like it makes sense to tackle these in release order, so let's go all the way back to 2017 for Sonic Mania first. Now Mania looks great. It was sort of always going to look great because it's not that demanding, but it really is easy on the eye both in handheld and docked mode. It also fits the Switch to a T. This was my first time playing the game. It was a huge blind spot for me. I've owned it several times, but I hadn't played it until today for this video, and I even had a copy stolen from my postbox once. But I can totally see myself going back to it in handheld mode pretty often. I've spoken about the GBA being my favourite handheld console on this channel before, and this, in handheld mode, feels oddly nostalgic of my time playing the Sonic Advance games. I'm willing to bet this isn't the fastest the game can run, but it doesn't struggle at all, and because of the way Mania improves upon the classic Sonic formula, you can really feel the momentum. The game feels incredibly rewarding on that front. Pulling off a tricky sequence of platforming to keep or build momentum is really addictive. By contrast, it can also be punishing and frustrating in a way that the classic formula always can be. Okay. No! But it's not really a negative. It works in the game's favour because it only reinforces your desire for that better momentum. The replayability that offers to find the path that gives you the best momentum is a huge win for Sonic Mania. The game's also incredibly cheap, and I know it's the oldest, so that kinda makes sense, but I'll bring this back up in a few games' time. It's really just another win for Mania. I think despite me only playing this for the first time for this video, that it's clear to see why Mania has the reputation it does, and for that reason, I think it has to go S tier. Next was, oh dear. I just want to say I never wanted to revisit that game ever in my life. I do not think fondly of it. But I did for this video, and boy. Let's start with the good because there's really not much of it. It looks good. I mean it looks okay. I'm not a huge fan of this style, but for a Switch port it looks good on the system. Sometimes maybe even impressive. I like Infinite as a concept too. I think there's a lot of potential with that character, but honestly, these are maybe the only positives I can personally level it. I appreciate what they were going for with the character creation, but it misses the mark a bit for me. I think, for me personally, I've never been one to create my own OCs or anything, so if I'm playing a Sonic game, I just want to be playing as an established character. The less said about the gameplay, the better. I just find it all very bland and dull, and yeah, I don't like this one, and I don't know many people that do. I'm sorry man, it's just gotta be D tier. Next is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and yes, Sonic's in it, so I am counting it here. I suck at it. I'm really, really bad at it, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time talking about it because I can't pretend to fully understand it. I just sort of button mash and hope. It's obviously an incredible game, it's a huge package, but as a Sonic appearance it's great too. He feels great to play, he's fast, maybe a little too fast for someone like me, but he feels like Sonic, which is the main thing. If this was a video about games in general on the Nintendo Switch, this would be S tier, but because we're focusing on Sonic games here and it's not really one, I'll go A tier. Sonic's next release was Team Sonic Racing. This was another game that I played for the first time for this video, and I love kart races, so I wish I had nicer things to say about it because I think it's a good game, genuinely. It's just not for me. The sort of team-based mechanic is really innovative and strong, and yet that's sort of where it stumbles for me. I much prefer being a lone racer. But for what it's worth, I think it's implemented very well, and the item transfer mechanic is also a really neat addition to that. The story mode is but I don't particularly think this is a narrative you'd expect to challenge those of the mainline Sonic games. The drifting is also really rewarding when you master it, but, you know, perhaps unfairly. This video is about Sonic on Switch, and I have to judge it for that, and it simply isn't the best kart racer on the system. It struggles frame rate wise in comparison to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is obvious because that's a first party release, but it really just makes TSR feel slow by comparison. And just on a personal level, the team mechanic itself isn't a big enough draw for me to play this over something like Mario Kart. I'd like to play this game elsewhere because I think with better performance it could really be a great time, but for now, C tier. Next is Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020. Now, I have a soft nostalgic spot for these games. They're not world beaters, but I used to love them as a kid playing them with my family, so I really like them for what they offer. I think here some of the minigames are less intuitive control-wise than I remember in previous titles. Sometimes I feel like the Joy-Cons are working against me, but outside of that, this is more of the same fun minigame sports that the games are known for. The character models for the Sonic characters in particular are great here too. Shadow, we're gonna hit this like Maria is the target, okay? Damn. Yep, okay. It's one of those games where it's simply more fun with other people, but it'll also ruin your relationships because it's so easy to get competitive about it. It's also a great wrist workout sometimes. It's not life-changing, but it's a fun time. B tier. Okay, so next is Sonic Colors Ultimate, and this is a weird one. Firstly, it's Sonic Colors, right? And Sonic Colors is pretty good. It has some problems. I'm not a huge fan of how much the game slows down in the 2D sections, but it's a really strong entry in the franchise, and we know that already. But this remaster is kind of a different story to me. At launch on Switch, this was borderline unplayable, and a huge buggy mess. And as far as remasters go, there's just not an awful lot remastered here. The game doesn't look all that impressive, it doesn't look bad. Sonic Colors looked great, so it can't look bad. But this version just doesn't do as much as it should to improve on that. There's a huge wad of missed visual potential here, which is especially confusing when this game runs at 30 frames per second. So it's not like they've sacrificed visual improvements for frame rate. Like, I don't know, Colors is great, but this version just doesn't really feel like it excels any better at performance or visuals than the original Wii game did. And honestly, I think I'd rather just play that version. C tier. Next up is Sonic Origins, and this is what I was talking about with Mania earlier. This game is great. It's a collection of the first 4 Sonic games, and they look and feel great to play on Switch. There are a few small quality of life improvements too, and you know, if someone came to me and specifically said, hey, I want to play the first 4 Sonic games for the first time, which version do you recommend? I probably would recommend Sonic Origins, and especially on Switch, this is a really neat compilation to play in handheld. However, if that person instead asked me, hey, I want to play Sonic games in general for the first time, I'd probably just tell them to play Mania. It might be a controversial thought, but I find Mania's remixes of the original stages to act as a great, fluid, greatest hits-like experience of classic 2D Sonic gameplay, and considering the price, it's so much easier to justify. I think Origins was very expensive for what it is. What it is great. These are phenomenal games, and they look and play very well here. It's just not as good as Mania for me, so it's going A tier. The next Sonic release on Switch was Sonic Frontiers. I've made my thoughts on Frontiers known on this channel already. I love this game. I really appreciate a lot of the character development here, and I got really hooked on the gameplay loop of Frontiers when I played it for the first time. Getting to run around an open area as Sonic genuinely feels like a form of wish fulfillment. This version, though, is not the definitive way to play Frontiers. The frame rate is okay, it maintains a fairly stable 30 frames per second, but it cuts back quite terribly in the visual department to do it. Assets pop in and out, sometimes refusing to pop in until you're literally trying to jump onto them in a platforming puzzle. It's difficult. Art direction wise, I'm not a huge fan of how the islands look in Frontiers anyway. I think the green realism they've gone for is not helped at all by the Switch hardware. It's just a visual mess, and it's enough to give you a headache. This game running correctly would be an A for me, I really do love it. But here, on this system, it's gotta go C tier. Now, Sonic Superstars is a weird one. I really like it as a modern take on classic Sonic, and especially on Switch. It looks rougher than other platforms of course, but it looks and plays great here regardless. The gameplay is slick, and it feels like a natural evolution of 2D Sonic gameplay from Mania onwards, and the whole thing just feels very solid in a really positive way. I really enjoyed my time with it. There's some great stages here and it looks so colourful. I know the reputation of the game has slipped a little since release online. I think people generally have found it a bit forgettable and stale, and I sort of understand it. As good as it is, I think its biggest problem is that there aren't too many risks taken here. This is a modern take on classic Sonic and not much more than that. But I do love it for what it is, and what it does do, it does very well. For that reason, it has to go A tier for me. That brings us to the latest Sonic release on Switch, SonicXShadowGenerations. If you've been watching this channel previously, you'll be aware that I love Shadow, and so I might be a little biased here, but I genuinely think SonicXShadowGenerations is perhaps the best Sonic game since SA2. Sonic Generations was already great, and getting to play it in handheld with really strong visuals and performance is a genuine treat, especially considering the fact that it's sort of like having your cake and eating it too. Shadow Generations is the real draw here. It looks a little worse than Generations does on Switch, understandably, this is all brand new, but it still looks perfectly decent and performs well. And it's peak 3D Sonic gameplay. I gravitate towards this game because of Shadow, of course, but it's the stages that are excellent here. In fact, I think these are some of the best Sonic stages I've ever played. It's truly exceptional, and it's incredible that packaged within it you get to enjoy Sonic Generations too. I really think that this is one of the best things to happen to the Sonic community in such a long time. It's such a great package, and I really sincerely hope that we continue to get more like Shadow Generations in the future. This stage design is so good that I'm not sure I could ever settle for anything less again. This is as S tier as Sonic gets. This is my final ranking of Sonic on Switch. I'd love to know your ranking down below. To conclude, I think it's important to talk about Sonic on Switch generally. The reason I wanted to make this video was because the Switch is a phenomenal system, and Sonic sells very well on it, yet performance-wise, the games have been a little inconsistent. And I think in playing all these games for this video, I've only had that point reiterated. Sonic and Nintendo have always made sense together for me because I grew up with Sonic on the GBA, Wii and DS first and foremost. And so the inconsistency of the ports onto this system is a little disappointing. It's not that any of them are unplayable or anything, and if this is your only way to experience these Sonic games, I think you'll have a great time. I just think that these ports don't accommodate the Switch's hardware limitations as well as they could. And I don't think it does either the games themselves, nor those playing them, the justice they deserve. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please consider sticking around. And please do let me know your rankings or how you feel about Sonic on Switch in general down below.